A father and son training for an Ironman triathlon. What started out as a beautiful Sunday morning bike ride in April of 2011 turned deadly.
A driver fresh off an all-night bender hit and killed David and Trey Doolittle. 10 years after a jury convicted Thomas Grooms of murder, we're taking a look back at a case that actually set a precedent.
WECT investigative reporter Ann McAdams has tonight's Crimes of the Cape Fear report.
David Doolittle was 46 years old. His son Trey, a high school senior, 2 weeks shy of his 18th birthday. They were training for a triathlon, out for a long bike ride on River Road when tragedy struck. Another driver, Rob Miller, saw the whole thing.
County 911, what's the location of your emergency?
I'm on River Road, right before you get to Ashton High School. The car behind me, license plate GXX2319, just hit two bikers. They're neither one's moving, both have serious head trauma.
About how fast was he going when he hit them, you know?
I was going 50, 55. He was right behind me. And man says this one, he's barely breathing, but there is a pulse. Oh my God. Neither one of them conscious, and both of them. Please get someone here as soon as you can. This is the worst thing I've ever seen in my life.
One of the victims bounced off the car and went 180 feet. That was Trey. David actually rolled over the hood, crushing the driver's windshield.
The driver of the car, 63-year-old Thomas Grooms, tried to flee the scene, but Rob Miller blocked his path, took his keys, and held Trey's hand until authorities arrived.
As I entered and I got past the fire truck and everything, I just saw a huge debris field, of bicycle parts, tires, seats, gloves, shoes. And at that point, I knew I had something very critical.
Highway Patrol Sergeant Brian Phillips remembers the accident like it was yesterday. He says Thomas Grooms was still sitting in his car.
I remember very distinctively walking over there and looking at a man that was just had this look on his face like he was confused, like he wasn't even in the world. Just kind of like the blank stare. I could instantly tell that something wasn't right.
Trooper Phillips saw liquor bottles and beer cans littering the car, and after Grooms failed a field sobriety test, the trooper placed him under arrest. Crime scene investigator Lauren White went one step further, testing Grooms for substances that might not show up on a blood test.
And they were saying he's on something. This is not just alcohol. He's on something else too. Lauren jammed some Q-tips up his nose in order to swab that. She also put his mustache under a black light and it glowed like a Christmas tree.
Grooms wasn't just drunk. Tests showed he was high on bath salts.
A synthetic drug that was not even illegal at the time under North Carolina law. This case helped make it illegal. It was mephedrone, which is a synthetic form of cocaine that makes you hallucinate and even deranged.
Trey's mother, Joy, was in Charlotte at the time of the crash and got a voicemail that he'd been in an accident. She grabbed his two younger brothers and started driving towards Wilmington. She was halfway here when she found out David had also been hit and did not survive.
I remember distinctly telling the twins about their dad, and well, they already knew Trey had been hit, but I told them that their dad had been killed.
When Joy finally made it to the hospital, the hallway leading to Trey's room in the intensive care unit was lined with his high school friends.
And I got in to see Trey, and from the internal brain injury, his face was pretty much swollen beyond recognition. And I uncovered one of his feet because he had a plantar wart. And I had to see it just to make sure it was even him, because I didn't want it to be true. Not that I wanted it to be anybody else's child, but I didn't want it to be mine.
Trey died the following day, and authorities were determined to put the man who killed him behind bars. Although Grooms told investigators he'd been on a quiet date the night before the crash, surveillance video and credit card records showed he'd actually been on an all-night bender with a prostitute. District Attorney Ben David set out to try Grooms for murder, even though that had never been successfully done before unless the defendant had a criminal history for drunk driving.
Our theory was that because of his gross impairment with the 24 hours leading up to this incident, the fact that he was trying to flee the scene and did not render aid, despite the fact that there was a father and son laying helpless in front of him, we believed all of those things were meeting the definition of implied malice.
Despite his clean record, Grooms' ex-girlfriend testified that he frequently drove drunk, and she warned him he needed to stop or he was going to kill someone. A judge allowed a jury to hear her testimony, which helped convince them to convict Grooms of second-degree murder. His sentence, 25 years in prison.
Judge Paul Jones said he's had over 300 jury trials, and this was the saddest case he ever saw. And this case is now being used as precedent around the state and even around the country to show that someone can be convicted of murder for an impaired driving case, even if they haven't been convicted of DWI before, if you can establish they've driven impaired before.
Highway Patrol Sergeant Brian Phillips says he still thinks of the Doolittles almost every day.
Being around the family, you see the heartache that it causes, you see the pain that it causes, and it does affect you. Even now, I mean, I just feel it, you know. It's just like reliving what you saw and having to deal with that family and express, you know, the sorrow for them, you know, but you have it in your mindset too that it's your ultimate responsibility as a law enforcement officer to provide every piece of evidence that you can to ensure that this guy goes to prison for what he did.
Through his death, Trey was able to save several lives. A local mom received his heart. Other organ recipients received his kidney, pancreas, and corneas. Joy Blakely helps Trey and David's memories live on by advocating for organ donation, speaking for Mothers Against Drunk Driving, and reminding drivers to share the road with cyclists. Ann McAdams, WECT News.